Let's start.
We understand you too have to get used to the new buses.
Now there are buses, on the street, so it's much more packed, much more jammed. Okay, Erev Tov. I'll start this shiur. I call this shiur Pinchas Long Life. You know that Chazal has several people. They believe that they lived a lot, like Lavan Arami, last week's Parsha, Balak. There are, I think I mentioned, yeah, I did mention, the Zohar that says that he's a grandson or son. But according to several Shittot, Lavan Arami is considered himself like Bil'am. And therefore, if we don't say that it's the same virtue of Bil'am or something like this, we do say that he lived a lot of years. The same thing happens, but not in Zohar, but in the mainstream in Chazal or even in the Pasuk itself about Pinchas, because Pinchas appears here like the son of Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, the grandson of Aaron, and it does. He substitutes his father's uncle Moshe Rabbeinu, and he takes revenge at the Midianite and the Kozbi Batzur, and therefore he deserves Keunat Olam. But Chazal, or the Mikra, we'll see in a minute, say that Pinchas lived much longer, and I don't want to deal this time why they did it. I'll deal it mamash on the margins, but not the main question. But take for granted that Chazal said that Pinchas has lived from here. He was young here, and he lived throughout the period of time of Yoshua and Sefer Shoftim till the very end of Sefer Shoftim. And so he has lived at least 300 years. Okay, that's a very, very special figure because after after Moshe Rabbeinu, we don't find anybody that lived even 120 years. It's an explicit pasuk, "Vayu yamav 120 shana," even though that the Avot, they lived more, but we see that the years of the Avot get smaller and smaller, Kehat and Amram, and then we have Moshe Rabbeinu, and from then on, we don't see somebody living so much years. And it's very, very complicated to say that Pinchas lived 300 years. But that's what Chazal said. I would like to discuss, pardon?
How long? How long does Sarah Bas Osher live?
Okay, Sarach Bat Asher is another figure, but yeah, with Sarach Bat Asher you have the same. There it's more midrash, it's more a midrashic issue. Okay, but it's the same thing. It's like Lavan. With Pinchas, it's more explicit. Pardon?
Yeah.
She was born before Moshe, so your theory still counts.
Right, right. Say that. There are figures. She is not alone. There are figures, but with Pinchas, it's one of the, that Pinchas Eliyahu, another story. The Gemara says that Eliyahu met in a cemetery. Okay, so we met somebody, asked him, "How can you be there? You're a Kohen, you're Pinchas." So Tosfot, Baba Metzia Kuf Yudale discusses it, whatever. But without it, well, let's speak about Novi. The Novi itself, it's very clear. So I just want to start with Rav Meidan's an idea. Uh, it's very similar to what I've said on Shabbat, to those who attended. On Shabbat, I said in the name of Reb Aaron Friedman that, Moti, you know his brother from Keren Be'avne, as Rosh Hashiva of Keren Be'avne, you know Reb David, Reb David, his brother. So he said something fantastic, I think, about the maftir, because usually we learn Parashat Balak in a row, that Balak hires Bil'am to curse Am Yisrael. He refuses, and then he asks Hashem. Hashem tells him no. The next time they come, and then he consults Hashem. Hashem says, "Okay, if you want, so go, but you say whatever I've said." And then he three times meets the she donkey, and then The fourth time he tried to curse, fails, goes to his place and gives a piece of advice to make Am Yisrael sin by Bnot Moab. But he offered, Rav Friedman, that Bnot Moab doesn't come at the end. Bnot Moab was in the middle. Is En Mukdam U'Mauchar b'Torah. And at the beginning, Balak sends Malachim to appoint Bilam. He refuses. He asks Kadosh Baruch Hu and he refuses. Then he says, I cannot do it, but go and be machtim with not ashitim. Okay? Am Yisrael makes the chet, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is angry at them and changes his mind. That's why at the second time, after a while, when he is hired again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him, okay, you should go if you want. Okay, that's by then he understands the change in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mind, Kivyochol, to say now, this time you cannot, you can do it. Later on, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen saves Am Yisrael and kills the sinners, and then there is a big Mageifa, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not angry anymore. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu prevents Bilam from cursing and stops him with a she-donkey. That's a very nice explanation to Parashat Bilam for those who didn't attend the Shiur. And the same thing happens now with Rav Meidan in another famous parasha, not clear at all. If you know, at the end of Sefer Shoftim, there are two stories that are unclear when its location, on time, when it happened. So the first one is Pesel Micha, Prakim Yud Zayin Yud Chet of Sefer Shoftim. The other one is the latter one is Prakim Yud Tet, Kaf and Kaf Aleph of Sefer Shoftim, the story of Pilegesh Begiva. And it's not clear at all when it happened, okay? But let's talk about the Pilegesh Begiva. There is a group rape, okay, in the Giva of the Pilegesh. And then Am Yisrael is very angry at Bnei Binyamin. They gather to make a war against Bnei Binyamin. And then one time HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them, go, and they go and fail. Second time HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them, go, and they go and fail. The three times they start crying, making tshuva, whatever, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them, okay, they make a big war, a battle with Shevet Binyamin. But Shevet Binyamin is almost extincted, and then we don't have the girls. Nobody can get married with Shevet Binyamin. Then Am Yisrael tries, says, we have to solve this problem. But who didn't come to Am Yisrael? It's Yovish Gilad, a city that didn't come to make the war against Shevet Binyamin. Okay, they didn't come. They violated what we said, the decree to come to the war. Okay, now we'll kill them all, and we'll leave some of them we'll leave some of them, the girls, the girls for the boys of Shevet Binyamin. Okay, and then it sounds like a tragedy of mistakes, okay, because one time HaKadosh Baruch Hu misled them, tell them to go to the war and they lose. And second time, the same thing. The third time they come and extinct a tribe. Then they regret for doing it. And then they regret by killing Yavesh Gilad. It doesn't sound like a normal way of decisions. So usually we say, okay, they were very puzzled because בימים ההם אין מלך בישראל איש הישר בעיניו יעשה. So the whole story depicts the days of the end of Sefer Shoftim, okay, when nobody knows exactly what to do, etc., etc. But on the other hand, we might look at it like Rav Meidan's style, as he does it, and this time is Rav Meidan, not Rav Friedman, and Rav Meidan says exactly the same thing. The story is not written correctly. The story is not written chronologically, okay? It started with Pilegesh Bagiv'ah. Am Yisrael gathers to the Giv'ah and hears a testimony of her husband saying about the affair, what happened exactly. And then they ask Shevet Binyamin to give us the Poshim, the criminals. Shevet Binyamin refuses, okay? That's it. Now, Am Israel doesn't start with a war. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, they refuse to give us the criminals. They are not so, okay, it's not nice, but they cooperate with their friends in the Giva. What can you do? Am Yisrael doesn't start, but Am Yisrael makes a shvuah, makes an awe, in order to prevent everybody to get married with Shevet Binyamin. Okay, they want to seclude Shevet Binyamin, to be secluded. Nobody will speak with you, nobody will get married with you, and therefore you'll be secluded. Nobody will talk with you. Okay, but now Am Yisrael hears that Yavesh Gilad didn't come to the Or and didn't come to the Cherem on Shevet Binyamin. Okay, so now there is no the decision doesn't contain anything because Yavesh Gilad didn't come, so they are not in the Shvuah, they are not banning Shevet Binyamin, so they can get married with Shevet Binyamin. So then Am Yisrael goes to a war against Yavesh Gilad. Okay? According to Rav Meidan's interpretation, the war against Yavesh Gilad preceded the war against Shevet Binyamin. Okay? It's not that they changed their mind each time. Am Yisrael banned Shevet Binyamin. Some city didn't come to ban. Am Yisrael was so angry at Yavesh Gilad, so instead of just shouting at them, they made a war and extincted them. Okay, and they were left just the women. That happened before. Okay, now Shevet Binyamin defends his friend in Yavesh Gilad and makes a war against Am Yisrael. Shevet Binyamin started. If you look at the psukim in Pilegesh Bagiv'ah, you'll see that Shevet Binyamin started, and you don't understand. Am Yisrael just gathered and Shevet Binyamin started. Why did it start? But if you say, like Rav Medan, that the whole story of Yavesh Gilad was before that, and Am Yisrael extincted the city of Yavesh Gilad for not coming to the ban. So now Shevet Binyamin reacted by a war, and then Am Yisrael made several wars with them. Why did Am Yisrael lose at the two former battles against Shevet Binyamin? According to his interpretation, because the extinction of Yavesh Gilad. Okay? Am Yisrael, by being so angry at Shevet Binyamin, they just found the small victim of Yavesh Gilad, the innocent victim of Yavesh Gilad, that they made something. They didn't come to say, oh, it's not nice, but they didn't do something big. And they came and הוציאו את הכעס עליהם, כן? They were so angry at Yavesh Gilad that they killed, almost extending them, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu was angry at Am Yisrael, and therefore Binyamin, when they started the war, they won 2 battles of the 3. That's Rav Meidan's interpretation. Okay? So the first mahalach is just to set the meorot, the circumstances differently than one we're used to. Usually we're used to wars against Binyamin, and then at the end the story of Yavesh Gilad. According to Rav Meidan, the story of Yavesh Gilad happened before, and then we can understand, okay, the whole situation in Yavesh Gilad, and later why Am Yisrael lost by Binyamin. Now let's go to Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen appears explicitly in ספר שופטים פרק כ', אוקיי? ופנחס בן אלעזר נביא לישראל בעת ההיא, Okay, it's very clear that he was still alive on Pilegesh Bagiva. You might say that shows, I'm going back to what I started with, that says that he lived 300 years because he lived from Parashat Pinchas, and he wasn't a baby, okay, he was a nar at least, or a youngster, and he lived 300 years and more at the end of Sefer Shoftim. That depends how you...
He was born in Mitzrayim.
Right, okay, נכון, so he was 44, okay, you're right, and 300, he was almost 400 years, okay, so that makes the question even bigger, okay. That depends on the question when the story of Pilegesh Bagiva happened. Because the Seder Olam, the sefer that gives a chronology of Am Yisrael that Professor Milikovsky made a research on, says that Pilegesh Bagiva happened at the beginning of Sefer Shoftim. Why? Because we see several, I can give you several הוכחות, okay? Because הקדוש ברוך הוא says יהודה יעלה. They ask who would fight בנימין first, and הקדוש ברוך הוא says יהודה יעלה. The same style we have at the beginning of ספר שופטים, יהודה יעלה. Okay? So that's one הוכחות. Another הוכחה, another proof that it was at the beginning, because שבט הדני in Pesel Micha, he looks for his נחלה, okay? He seeks for more area and he goes to the north. And if you say that it was at the end of Sefer Shoftim, why did he look? From the days of Yoshua, he has already had נחלה. So that says that it was at the beginning of תקופת השופטים. Another reason to say that it was at the beginning of תקופת השופטים is that Pinchas ben Elazar comes there. And if you say that he was just, as Larry said, 44 at the days of Moshe, and let's say 28 years according to Chazal of Yehoshua, so he was 72, not so much, at the beginning of Sefer Shoftim. And if you say that he was like 90 or 100, okay, we can understand that. But even though there are midrashim that says explicitly that say that Pinchas ben Elazar was at the end of Sefer Shoftim. Pilegesh Bagiva happened at the end of Sefer Shoftim, and then we have to say that he lived almost 400 years. What we can see about his figure? This parasha, we see that he was a very jealous person, chamur moach, I don't know how to say it in English, and he didn't wait to Moshe, and כל הבועל ארמית, קנאים פוגעים בו, I am kala, I am zealous, jealous, whatever, and he comes and kills them. And he is praised in all פרשת פנחס, פרשת בלק, פנחס בן אלעזר השיב את חמתי, לכן הנני נותן לו את בריתי שלום. The second time that we find Pinchas ben Elazar is, explicitly, is at the very end of Sefer Yoshua, Perek Kaf. I won't read it now, but you remember that Bnei Gad ובני ראובן built מזבח in עבר הירדן המזרחי. And Am Yisrael were very suspicious about that. And they asked them, how can you do it? You do another mizbeach not in Shiloh, okay? And then they sent a delegation to Am Yisrael. They said, ma pitom, we didn't mean it. We didn't want to make anything wrong. We just were afraid that our sons, they would never remember the center in Eretz Yisrael, and they'll have something like, they'll have כאילו, the same thing in עבר הירדן. And then it's written explicitly, וישלחו בני ישראל אל בני ראובן ואל בני גד ואל חצי שבט המנשה, אל ארץ הגלעד, את פנחס בן אלעזר בן אהרון, בן אלעזר הכהן, okay? So Pinchas is mentioned again there. It's not so many years after Pinchas. As I said, he was 70, okay? Okay. But what happens here? Let's say that they could not explain themselves well. What would happen? It was Milchemet Achim, okay? Brother war, Am Yisrael בעבר הירדן המערבי, against the 2.5 tribes in עבר הירדן המזרחי, just for building a מזבח בעבר הירדן. עכשיו, what was a story? Maybe, okay? What was a story? In Am Yisrael, there is a center. Later on, it will be in Yerushalayim, but till now, it's in Shiloh. That's the main place in which all the Avodat Hashem is being done. And Ever Yarden, the 2.5 tribes, try to make an alternative, or are suspected of making an alternative place to Avodat Hashem. Pinchas ben Elazar is very zealous. He almost caused Milchemet Achim with them. At the last moment, they could explain why they made it, and they prevented themselves, okay, themselves there, but from the war. But Pinchas' character almost caused another war. The third time in which we find Pinchas ben Elazar is, as I said, in Pilegesh Bagivah. According to what Rav Meidan said, Am Yisrael was chamum moach. Why? Because Am Yisrael was very angry at the rape of Shevet Binyamin, but instead of taking revenge from Shevet Binyamin, Am Yisrael found the innocent city of Yavesh Gilad, killed them entirely, almost everybody there, left just the Nekevot, and then why did you kill them? You should have killed Shevet Binyamin in the Giv'ah, not the sinners in Yavesh Gilad. They didn't do anything. But Am Yisrael was very, very zealous. Who was the leader of Am Yisrael by then? It's written explicitly. Pinchas, ben Elazar, ben Aaron, HaKohen. Okay? So we have 3 times. The first time, good, in our parasha. The third time, very bad. Because of Pinchas, Am Yisrael was zealous. Am Yisrael tried to exterminate Yavesh Gilad instead of making the war against Binyamin. And Am Yisrael exterminated entirely Yavesh Gilad just because of the zealousy of Pinchas. In the middle, between the 2 events, there is a one event of the end of Sefer Yoshua that because of Pinchas, Kim'at Milchemet Achim occurred, and at the last moment, the 2.5 tribes could explain themselves and prevented themselves from Milchemet Achim. So we see that he has a tendency to prefer the Kana'ut L'Shem Hashem on the regular Torah. One time it's perfect. One time when you do it, it's perfect. In our parsha. When you do it 3 times, let's say that you are a person that thinks that you keep the mitzvot, but one time you are poisek to a person that et la'asot la'Hashem eferu toratecha. In this time you should not keep the law, keep the chukim. You should prefer violate them because of a specific reason. If you do it one time, okay, I can say that it was pikuach nefesh. You had a special reason. If you do it every time, so I say that you are just a lenient person. You're not makpid on the chukim. That happens with Pinchas. Pinchas, when doing it one time, was very nice. When doing it 3 times, the second time was danger, the third time was tragic. And Rav Meidan keeps on and says, who did he learn it from? According to the famous Midrash, the תפסה זמרי בן צלו בבלוריתה, okay? זמרי בן צלו holds the girl and brought her to Moshe. אמר לו בן אמרם, זו אסורה או מותרת? Is she permitted or prohibited? אם תאמר אסורה, what's the difference between בת יתרו, ציפורה, to whom you are married, that you married. נתעלמה ממנו הלכה, וכולם, everybody cries, אוקיי? וירא פנחס בן אלעזר. That's a מדרש גמורה בסנהדרין. מה ראה? ראה מעשה ונזכר הלכה. הופ, he remembers something that happened in the past. אמר לו, אחי, אבי, אבא, משה רבינו, you're the brother of my grandson, my grandfather, לא כך לימדתני ברידתך מהר סיני, הבועלת הנוכרית קנאים פוגעים בו? What does it mean? לא כך לימדתני ברידתך מהר סיני, הבועלת הנוכרית קנאים פוגעים בו? Usually we understand that among the huge amount of Torah that Moshe brings from Har Sinai, he gave Torah about Kanaim Pogim Bo. Nobody remember it, but Pinchas recalled the very halacha of Kanaim Pogim Bo and told Moshe. But Rav Midan says no. What happened when Moshe went from Har Sinai? Just 2 days ago we saw it. Yudzayin B'Tomuz. Moshe metzechet ha'egel. What did Moshe do? Through the luchot, but like metaphorically, Rav Meidan says he didn't throw the luchot in order to burn them. He wanted them to burn, or to break, זה לא תרצח. Moshe Rabbeinu zealously tries to kill, he takes Shevet Levi and kills 3,000 people with no matter, he doesn't look to the right, to the end, האומר לאביו ולאמו, ואת אחיו לא הכיר ואת בניו לא ידע, כי שמרו אמרתך, he doesn't count anybody. After killing, making a massacre, then Moshe says, okay, I'm mad, then he can come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for redemption, okay? But at the beginning, the very beginning, when he lands from Har Sinai, he descends from Har Sinai, he says, no, I kill everybody. Pinchas sees that and keeps in mind that sometimes you have to behave like this. And then what he does here, and that's what he mentions to Moshe, כשירדת מהר סיני לא אמרת לי, הבועל ארמית קנאים פוגעים בו? משה רבנו never said the halacha. Moshe Rabbeinu behaved that way by killing a lot of people, okay? With Chet HaEgel, so Pinchas records, says, okay, in some events that are very crucial, I should behave like this, not to see to the right, to the end, just to kill. That's what he does here. But it's dangerous when he does it again, almost in Pilagesh, at the end of Sefer Yoshua. It's very problematic when he does it in Pilagesh Bagiva. And because of him, the whole city of Yavesh Gilad got extincted. And because of him, the whole milchama with Binyamin started. And because of him, another thing was done. And with this I finish. You know that if you learn Parashat Iftach, so Chazal said that Pinchas ben Elazar was a Novi by then, and Chazal said that Pinchas didn't want to go to Iftach, Iftach didn't want to go to Pinchas. Okay, so it sounds as if they have a kavod of honor, ego problems, that Pinchas has an ego and Iftach has an ego because he's not very clever, but it doesn't make sense that Pinchas had an ego. So Rav Meidan explains, no. You know what caused Chazal to mention the name of Pinchas? Because it's the same story of Pilegesh Bagiva, where he explicitly is mentioned. He behaved the same, because Am Yisrael made a cherem on Yavesh Gilad, or on Shevet Binyamin. Pinchas was a leader. He could have violated the Shvuah. He didn't want to do that. Instead, he was very eager to exterminate the whole city of Yavesh Gilad. Because of his jealousy, he killed Ir Vayam B'Yisrael, and therefore he made the circle of Binyamin, the wars between Binyamin, etc. Thousands and tens of thousands of people got killed just because of him. Okay? So the same thing happens with the Shvuah of Iftach about his daughter. Chazal sees the Gzera Shavah. In Pilegesh Bagiva, that according to Chazal happened before, Pinchas ben Elazar didn't want to cancel the Shvuah, the awe against against Yavesh Gilad. Because of him, a lot of people got killed. So the same thing happens with Iftach's daughter. Iftach's daughter is in the age or the years of Pinchas, and he has the same behavior. He doesn't want to violate the Shvuah because he's very makpid on the Shvuah, like Zcharia ben Avkulas later in Churban Abayit, and therefore he doesn't want to violate. So we've met Pinchas 4 times. One time in our parsha, very blessed. One time at the end of Sefer Yoshua, Kimat Milchemet Achim. One time in Pilagesh Bagiva, because of him, according to Rav Midan, the whole Milchama in Yavesh Gilad and the whole circumstances occurred. 4th time in Iftach, where he is not explicitly mentioned, but Chazal made the Gzera Shava, the same figure, the same behavior, the same leadership, and said that Pinchas ben Elazar. And as I said, again, you can do jealousy 1 time. You can pass over the rules and say, okay, this is a very excluded case, an exclusion. But if you do it 3, 4 times, you have a problem. You cannot be a leader. And that's what happens with him. He prefers Kiddush Hashem, Kiddush Hashem, Kiddush Hashem, Kanaut LaHashem over the Shlemut of Am Yisrael again and again and again. And it started well, but it ended tragically. Good night for this time. Liלה טוב. לילה טוב.
לילה טוב, תודה.
לילה טוב.
תודה רבה.